Welcome to Dust of Passion. My name is Sherry Pearl, and this is your late night corner for intimate, romantic stories whispered just for you. If you enjoy spending these nights with me, don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and let me know how today's story makes you feel. Now, make yourself comfortable, dim the lights, and let's begin. The night I almost cheated on my husband didn't start with sex. It started with a cup of office coffee and a pair of black heels. Dear Sherry, that sounds dramatic, I know, but it's the most honest way I can begin. I've been listening to your stories for months now, mostly late at night, when my husband is already asleep beside me, turned towards the wall. The only light in the room is the lamp on my bedside table, and your voice in my headphones. Sometimes I feel you know me better than the people I actually live with. Maybe it's because you say things I'm terrified to say out loud, that it's allowed to want more than you should be grateful, it's fine, that you can have a decent, stable life and still feel like something inside you is slowly going dark. My name is Marta. This year I'll be 38. I've been married for 13 years to a calm, predictable man everyone calls a good guy. And he is a good guy. He doesn't drink. He doesn't shout. He remembers my birthday. He takes the bins out once a week without being asked twice. Our holiday photos look like an advert for a very sensible life. Him in a t-shirt, me in a floaty dress, some sea or mountains behind us, or an old town whose name I've already forgotten. On paper, it looks perfect. Somewhere along the way, I disappeared. I can't point to the exact day I started to suffocate. It wasn't a big, dramatic explosion, more like a slow, quiet leak, drip by drip. The evenings blurred into each other, him on the sofa with a series he half-watched, me in the kitchen unloading the dishwasher, the same jokes, the same conversations about work, the same debate about whether we could afford a new sofa this year. He didn't cheat on me, he didn't hurt me, he didn't turn into a monster. He just stopped looking at me like a woman. I became background, reliable, comfortable, always there. So I did what a lot of women do when they don't want to admit, even to themselves, that they're unhappy. I bought scented candles, nice mugs, decorative cushions. I changed my hair colour, then went back to the old one. I joined a yoga class because apparently you find yourself on the mat. All I could feel was that my body remembered it used to be alive, flexible, awake. After class, I'd go back to a flat that smelt of washing powder and the same tomato sauce my husband cooked every other day. I'd fold laundry, scroll my phone, lie down next to a man who loved me in a quiet, practical way and had absolutely no idea how lonely I felt. And then, on a completely ordinary Tuesday, I met him. His name was Leon, 29. The new graphic designer at the agency where I work as a project manager. He appeared in the open plan office one morning like a glitch in the system. Not just in the building, in my life. He wasn't a glossy poster boy, a bit too thin, hair a touch too long, dark stubble that looked like it had been there for days on purpose. His shirt was undone one button too far, like he'd been in a rush or simply didn't care. But his eyes. No one had looked at me like that for years. Dark, watchful, amused, as if he was quietly taking everything in and tasting it. Someone brought him over to my desk. Marta, this is Leon, the new guy. He'll be working with us on the coffee shop campaign. He held out his hand. Warm, steady grip. Not trying to impress me, just present. So you're the famous Marta everyone's afraid of, he said, the corner of his mouth lifting. I laughed, more than I meant to. They're not afraid, I said. They just respect deadlines." He smiled properly then, one of those smiles that starts in the eyes and only afterwards reaches the mouth. I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment something woke up in me, like a nerve under the skin that had been numb for a very long time. At first, everything was harmless. Silly emails, "Please don't kill me, I can't finish this today." My replies with a smiley face and a "you owe me" coffee. Short chats by the printer, longer ones in brainstorms. I noticed he'd usually sit where he could see me, not obviously staring, just aware, present. Once, as I tucked my hair behind my ear, I caught him looking. He dropped his gaze quickly, cheeks tightening like a teenager who'd been caught. And there I was, 38, mortgage, husband who falls asleep with the remote in his hand. And I felt that old electric awareness spread through my chest. Somebody was looking at me. There's one Friday I remember clearly. The day had been endless, calls, changes, last-minute slides. By 6 o'clock, most of the office had escaped into their weekends. I stayed behind to finish a client presentation. Leon stayed too, tweaking visuals. The open space grew darker and quieter. Only our two screens glowed in the dusk like little windows into other worlds. I rubbed my eyes, stood up and wandered over to the window. Outside, the usual city evening, headlights, buses, lit windows of other people's lives. "Bad day?" I heard behind me. "Normal day," I sighed. "Sometimes it just feels like I'm living in a copy and paste loop." "I wouldn't say that," he replied. His voice was calm, soft around the edges. "A copy and paste loop doesn't wear shoes like that." I looked down at my heels. Black, classic, higher than they needed to be. I'd put them on that morning for no reason other than wanting to feel like a woman, not just a project machine. "What have my shoes got to do with anything?" I asked. "Someone who's genuinely indifferent to their life," he said, "doesn't bother with details like that. You do." It was such a simple thing to say, and somehow it slid right under my defenses. He called me Marta, but every now and then he'd slip into the polite "miss" in Polish in meetings, and that sent the oddest shiver down my spine. Respectful, but playful, as if he saw all the versions of me at once. That evening, we left together. We both needed the tube. The lift smelt faintly of coffee and dust. He stood just close enough for me to feel his warmth through the air between us. Outside, a fine rain was falling. Not proper rain, just a soft mist that sketched the light. "Got an umbrella?" he asked. "I've got a husband on the other side of the city, if that's what you're asking," I said, lightly. Half joke, half shield. "I was asking about an umbrella," he said. But there was that flicker in his eyes again, that tiny spark of something unnamed. Later, one night, we ended up at the same tram stop. It was late. I was coming home from a meeting that had dragged on. He'd been at some training. The streets were almost empty. The street lamps painted everything in that soft, yellowish light that makes life look slightly unreal, like a film set. He had a dark hoodie on, which made him look even younger. I sat down on the bench and slipped my shoes off for a moment. My feet felt like stone. "You really shouldn't do that," he said, grinning. "Extremely irresponsible behavior." "Just for 1 minute," I muttered, massaging my aching foot. "I want to not be responsible." He watched me for a moment. "You know," he said, "sitting like that, you don't look like a scary project manager. You look like a girl who's just come out of a gig." I burst out laughing, that mixture of cheek and actual, genuine respect. It was like wine, warm, dangerous, very easy to drink too much of. At home, the usual scene. My husband at the table, empty plate pushed to the side, the TV glowing in the background. "You're late," he remarked, glancing at the clock. No accusation, just an observation. "Want me to heat up the pasta?" "No, it's fine," I said. "I ate something at the office." I hadn't. My stomach was tight with hunger, but not for food. Hungry for that look from under the hood, for that private joke at the tram stop, for that feeling of being seen. After that, I noticed Leon around me more and more. He'd walk past my desk on his way to the kitchen. He'd leave little printed memes on my keyboard about projects due yesterday. He sent me playlists for surviving Mondays. One day he messaged, "This song sounds like you on a Friday at 6 p.m. I wrote back, "And how do I sound on a Monday at 9? His reply came a moment later. Like someone pretending they don't feel anything while feeling everything. I stared at that message far longer than I should have. Everything between us was still, technically, decent, respectable, safe. We weren't flirting openly, no obvious touches, nothing you couldn't explain away. But inside, I knew the line had blurred. Infidelity doesn't start when a body touches a body. It starts when someone else becomes the first person you think of when something happens, when their name is the name your mind runs to. He had become that name. The turning point was a business trip. 2-day conference in another city. Me, Leon, and 2 colleagues. Early train, coffee in paper cups. Hotel by the conference centre. Beige corridors, identical rooms with identical framed pictures on the walls. At reception, we each got a key card. I barely glanced at mine until we reached our floor. My room, 612. His, 614. Next door, a thin wall between us, in theory and in practice. The first day was the usual blur. Talks, slides, stands, business cards, polite conversation. In the evening, the 4 of us went to the hotel restaurant. One colleague left early. "I've got emails." The other joined a group from another company at the bar, and suddenly it was just us. One table, one bottle of wine between us, and that feeling of being suspended in a little bubble outside of normal life. "To copy and paste loops," Leon said, lifting his glass. "To the courage to get out of them," I replied. We clinked glasses. The wine was warm on my tongue. Too easy. We talked. God, we talked. Not just about campaigns and clients. About real things. His last relationship. We were both too much in our heads, not enough in our lives. My marriage. Perfect on paper, full of soft cracks inside. At one point he asked, "If you could start again, what would you do differently?" I stared at my glass for a moment. "I'd stop being so afraid of disappointing everyone," I said, "and I'd ask myself more often what I actually want, not only when it feels like it's already too late." "Do you think it is too late?" he asked, quietly this time. I looked at him, at his face in the soft restaurant light. Too young for my life, and yet somehow exactly the right age for the woman I'd forgotten I was. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I'm afraid to find out." We walked back along the corridor together in a silence that wasn't empty, just heavy. I could smell his aftershave, woody, warm, with a faint bitter note. We stopped outside room 612. "Good night, Marta," he said, resting his hand against the wall by my shoulder. Such a simple gesture. And yet suddenly it felt as if the corridor, the hotel, the whole world had faded slightly, like we were under glass. "Good night," I answered, but my voice sounded different in my own ears, softer, lower, like it had slipped down into some deeper part of me. For a heartbeat we stood too close enough that if I lifted my chin the slightest bit, our mouths would meet. I could see the faint freckles on his neck, the way his throat moved when he swallowed. I felt my whole body tighten and soften at once. He didn't kiss me. He shifted back, only a fraction, as if he'd fought and won an internal battle. "You go in first," he said, stepping aside, giving me space. In my room, I shut the door and just stood there, back against it, heart slamming in my chest like I'd run up 10 flights of stairs. On the little desk, the conference folder lay exactly where I'd left it. Pens rode neatly beside it. Everything in order, safe. Everything except me. I turned on the shower, hoping the noise would drown out my thoughts. Hot water slid over my shoulders, my neck, my back. It made my skin flush, but it didn't put out the fire he'd lit in me. In the steamed-up mirror, I caught my reflection. Slightly swollen eyes. Mascara smudged at the corner. I didn't look like a femme fatale. I looked like a tired woman who'd accidentally remembered she had a body. And yet, for the first time in years, I felt fully alive. And very, very guilty. I wrapped myself in the hotel dressing gown, soft, heavy cotton against still damp skin, the faint smell of washing powder and something that wasn't quite my own. Then I heard it. A knock. So soft I almost thought I'd imagined it. I opened the door a fraction. Leon stood there, same eyes, only darker in the corridor light. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I know this isn't right, but I couldn't sleep knowing you're here, next door, and that tomorrow I'll pretend it means nothing." My heart climbed up into my throat. "Leon," I began. My voice shook more than I wanted it to. "If tomorrow I have to go back to being just the guy from the team," he continued, "then tonight I need, just once, to be honest." He took a breath. "Since I met you, I've been looking forward to every day I see you. First I liked the way you work, then the way you laugh, and then everything else." The words hung between us like warm air, slowly unbuttoning all the excuses I'd stitched around myself. I opened the door wider. He didn't come in straight away. He stayed on the threshold, close enough that I could smell his skin, far enough that he was still giving me a choice. "This isn't a simple story," I said. My fingers tightened on the edge of the dressing gown. "I have a husband." "I know," he said immediately. "That's exactly why I'm standing here, not barging in like some idiot. But I also know something in you goes out when you talk about home, and lights up when you talk about things that move you. And I can't pretend I don't see that. I still don't know what tipped the scales. It wasn't one moment, it was all of them. His looks by the coffee machine, that night at the tram stop, the Friday with the glowing monitors, the wine, the corridor, my own loneliness. I stepped back, just one pace, enough space for him to cross the line, enough space for me to know I'd let him. He came in. I closed the door. The soft click was absurdly loud. For a long moment we simply stood there, facing each other. The room hummed with the low, steady sound of the air conditioning. My pulse was louder. His hand brushed mine. Barely a touch. But my skin reacted as if someone had stroked me with fire. Our fingers tangled properly then, warm palm against warm palm. His thumb moved, tracing a small, unconscious circle over my skin. He lifted his other hand, slowly, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. The backs of his fingers skimmed my cheek. Such a tiny touch, and I felt it everywhere. "If you say stop, I'll go," he whispered, "and tomorrow we'll talk about campaigns and deadlines and nothing else, I swear. But I didn't want to leave this hotel without, just once, stepping into the world where you actually shine. Not just quietly glow in the background for everyone else." I closed my eyes. In the cinema of my mind, images flashed past. My husband's "How was work?" asked with one eye still on the TV. Our silent dinners, the endless, polite, practical kindness. My nights with your podcast in my ears, Sherry. Listening to women who dared to say what I didn't. And then Leon, looking at me in a way that said, "I see you, all of you." I didn't say stop. When he kissed me, the world went very still. No hotel, no conference, no morning after, just warmth, softness, the familiar, sweet, bitter taste of wine now shared. It wasn't a hungry, greedy kiss. It was slow, careful, like someone touching a bruise with reverence, not wanting to hurt, but needing to feel it's really there. His hand slid from my cheek to the back of my neck. His fingers sat lightly at the base of my skull, not holding me, not trapping me. Just there. A question I could walk away from at any moment. I moved closer by a breath. The dressing gown shifted around my body. His chest brushed against the soft cotton at my collarbone. I felt the heat of him through the fabric, that solid, living warmth. My whole body answered, like a match to a dry fuse. We didn't go further. We both knew exactly where the line was and how easily it could be crossed. His forehead rested against mine, our noses barely touching, our hands still joined. I could feel his breath against my lips, shallow, unsteady, matching mine. If either of us had leaned in again, even a fraction, there would have been no turning back. "You have to go," I whispered. It was the last thing my body wanted. But it was the only thing the rest of my life could survive. For a moment, he stayed absolutely still. Then he slowly let out the breath he'd been holding. He stepped back. His hand slipped from mine, reluctantly, as if we were peeling apart something that hadn't quite formed yet. "All right," he said quietly. "But before I do, I need you to hear this." He looked straight into my eyes. "You didn't imagine it. You are seen. You are wanted. Not just as a wife, not just as an employee, not just as someone's safe, sensible choice." The tears came fast and hot. Not from shame, from relief. He opened the door and left. I sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at my hands. They still smelled faintly of his aftershave. I barely slept. Not because of the guilt, though it was there, a low, dull ache, but because something in me had shifted permanently. I'd seen myself differently in that mirror. Not as someone who should be grateful for stability. As a woman with desire, hunger, a pulse. The next day, we were both relentless professionals again. Polite, focused, maybe a little too polite. No one noticed anything. Why would they? The world kept turning. The conference ended. We went home. Only I wasn't the same woman who'd packed her bag 2 days earlier. When I walked into our flat, my husband was in the kitchen. "How was it?" he asked, stirring something on the hob. "Exhausting," I said, which technically was true. Good that it's over then, he replied. He leaned in and kissed my forehead, a habitual gesture. I've made your favourite spaghetti. I looked at his back as he sprinkled cheese over the pan, and I realised something. I didn't want to live on autopilot anymore. I didn't march in and throw my ring on the table. I didn't announce a grand, dramatic separation. I started smaller, but for me, they were enormous steps. I signed up for a creative writing course I'd secretly wanted to do for years. I stopped saying, "It's fine," when it wasn't. I told my husband I missed him, not his presence, him, his touch, his interest, his eyes on me as a woman, not just a safe pair of hands and a second income. At first, he looked at me like I'd started speaking another language. Then slowly, he started talking too. I found out he'd been swallowing his own frustrations, his own fears. We were both performing fine for each other, and neither of us actually was. He didn't magically become Leon. He didn't start writing me playlists or waiting for me under street lamps. But something between us softened, cracked open, shifted. We stopped living next to each other like two pieces of furniture. A few months later, Leon left the company. He came to my office on his last day, closed the door gently behind him. "I've had an offer from another agency," he said. "New city, new start." My chest tightened for a moment. Not that destructive squeeze of panic I'd felt in the hotel. Something gentler, a bruise being pressed. "Congratulations," I said, and meant it. "They'll be lucky to have you." We stood in silence for a second. Outside, I could hear the usual office sounds: printers, phones, someone laughing too loudly at a joke. Life carrying on. "Thank you," he said at last. "For everything. And for that, you have to go as well." "Thank you," I replied, "for reminding me I can still burn, not just quietly smoulder." He gave me that crooked little half smile. "Don't be afraid of your fire, Marta," he said. "It's there for a reason." We didn't hug. We didn't touch. He simply walked out. I watched him disappear between the desks, then sat back down at mine. Same chair, same screen, same job, different woman. "Sherry, I'm not writing so you can absolve me or condemn me. I know some people will say I cheated the moment I let him into that room. Others will shrug and say, nothing really happened. For me, it was an earthquake. It didn't bring the house down. It shook it hard enough to show me where the walls were cracked. I want your listeners to take one thing from my story. Desire does not make us bad. The hunger to be seen, wanted, noticed, that is not a whim. It's not immaturity. It's not ingratitude. It's human. We bury it under bills and school runs and deadlines. We ignore it because our lives on paper are not that bad. We tell ourselves other people have it worse, so who are we to want more? Sometimes someone arrives in your life not to stay. They arrive to wake you up. Leon didn't become my lover. He became my alarm clock. I don't know how my marriage will end. Maybe one day we'll choose separate paths. Maybe we'll learn properly how to live with each other, not just alongside each other. I know this much. I will never again agree to a life where I am just a dim little lamp in the corner of someone else's room. There is a fire in me. I'm done pretending it isn't there. If you'd like, read my story aloud on Dust of Passion. Maybe some woman, listening with her headphones on while the person next to her sleeps peacefully, will feel that she's not insane, not evil, not alone, just awake. Your listener, M. If this story touched you, please share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to Dust of Passion. And, if you feel ready, send me your own letter. Your story might be the next one I whisper into the night. Sleep softly, and let your heart stay awake. Good night, my dear.